Picture this, it's 1964 and you're cruising down Main Street in a brand new Pontiac GTO. The deep rumble of the 389 V8 turns heads, and you can't help but grin. This wasn't just a car, it was the birth of an American icon. The 1960s saw automakers doing something revolutionary, stuffing big engines into mid-size cars, creating a new breed of affordable performance that would change the automotive landscape forever. But how did this revolution start? And why did it catch on so quickly? The story begins with John DeLorean and his team at Pontiac, who had a crazy idea. Take the 389 cubic inch V8 from the full-size Catalina and drop it into the smaller Tempest. This wasn't just about raw power though. The GTO offered a complete package that appealed to a new generation of car buyers. You got bucket seats, a floor shifter, and dual exhaust. All the trappings of a sports car, but at a price that wouldn't break the bank. As word spread about this new breed of car, other manufacturers scrambled to catch up. Ford's response? The Mustang in 1964. This pony car took the market by storm, selling over 400,000 units in its first year alone. It wasn't just about the numbers though. The Mustang represented a shift in how Americans viewed their cars. No longer just transportation, but a statement of personal style and freedom. The 1960s set the blueprint for the muscle car era. Big power, affordable price, and style to spare. You could walk into a dealership with a modest budget and drive out with a car that could smoke the tires and turn heads in equal measure. Models like the Chevrolet Chevelle SS, Dodge Charger, and Plymouth Roadrunner soon joined the fray, each trying to outdo the others in terms of performance and attitude. But it wasn't just about straight-line speed. The muscle cars of the 1960s offered a raw, visceral driving experience that's hard to find in modern vehicles. With minimal technology and maximum power, these cars put you in direct control. You felt every shift, heard every rumble of the exhaust, and experienced the road in a way that's been largely sanitized in today's computerized cars. If you ask pretty much anyone what the fastest car on the street was in the early 1970s, you'd get a whole bunch of different answers. Someone in Detroit might brag about their neighbor's Hemi Cuda that was unbeatable on Woodward Avenue, while a guy in California might swear by the local street racing legend's Chevelle SS 454. That's because the early 70s weren't just the peak of muscle car performance, they were an all-out horsepower war. Imagine walking into a Chevy dealership back in 1970. For less than $4,000, you could drive out with a Chevelle SS packing the monstrous LS 6454 engine. This beast churned out a whopping 450 horsepower, more than many modern supercars. And Chevy wasn't alone in this arms race. Ford had the Mustang Boss 429. Pontiac was fielding the Trans Am SD 455. And Mopar was dominating drag strips with the Hemi Cuda. But it wasn't just about straight-line speed anymore. The Trans Am Racing Series was in full swing, pushing manufacturers to build cars that could turn corners too. Dodge answered the call with the Challenger TA, while Chevy brought out the Camaro Z28. These weren't just muscle cars anymore. They were full-fledged performance machines. The power levels during this era were simply staggering. Take the 1971 Plymouth Hemi Cuda, for example. Its 426 cubic inch Hemi V8 was conservatively rated at 425 horsepower. But real-world dyno tests often showed numbers north of 470. And let's not forget the 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1, which made 360 horsepower from its 455 cubic inch V8, and that was the official number. Many believe it was significantly underrated. But as the saying goes, the candle that burns twice as bright burns half as long. Storm clouds were gathering on the horizon. Insurance companies were getting nervous about all this power in the hands of young drivers, leading to sky-high premiums for high-performance cars. Worse yet, the 1973 oil crisis was just around the corner, about to change the automotive landscape forever. Picture this. It's 1987 and you're sitting at a stoplight in your brand new Buick Grand National. The guy next to you in a Corvette has no idea what's about to happen. The light turns green. You spool up that turbo, and suddenly you're leaving him in the dust, wondering what just hit him. Welcome to the 1980s, where muscle cars didn't die, they evolved. The 80s saw American performance cars embrace new technologies to deliver the thrills we craved while meeting stricter regulations. Gone were the days of massive displacement and carburetors. In their place, turbocharging and fuel injection became the new horsepower heroes. The Buick Grand National and its evil twin, the GNX, showed the world that a V6 could not only hang with V8s, but outrun them too. Meanwhile, the Fox body Mustang kept the pony car flame burning bright, proving that you didn't need a big block to go fast. But it wasn't just about straight-line speed anymore. Cars like the Camaro IROC Z brought handling into the equation, proving that muscle cars could turn corners too. No longer were these machines one-trick ponies. They were becoming well-rounded performers that could hold their own on a twisty road or a drag strip. Computer-controlled engines allowed for better fuel economy and emissions control without sacrificing performance. Take the 1985 Mustang GT's 5.0 V8, for example. It managed to squeeze out 210 horsepower while still meeting emission standards, a feat that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. This new breed of muscle cars showed that you could have your cake and eat it too. The Grand National deserves special attention here. In 1987, it was cranking out 245 horsepower and 355 pound-feet of torque from its turbocharged 3.8-litre V6. That might not sound like much compared to the monster motors of the early 70s, but this thing could run a quarter mile in the low 13-second range right off the showroom floor. And let's not forget the GNX, which bumped those numbers up to 276 horsepower and 360 pound-feet of torque. In 1987, that was enough to outrun just about anything on the road, including Corvettes and Ferraris. We've taken a wild ride through 3 decades of American muscle, each era leaving its own unique tire marks on the asphalt of automotive history. But now comes the tough part, crowning the ultimate muscle car era. It's not just about raw numbers or quarter-mile times. We need to look at the bigger picture, the impact these cars had on the industry and the culture they created. The 60s gave us the blueprint, the very concept of what a muscle car should be. It was all about accessibility and that raw, unfiltered driving experience. The 70s pushed the envelope, delivering peak horsepower figures and those iconic designs that still turn heads today. And just when we thought it was all over, the 80s proved that muscle cars could evolve, embracing new technologies while still keeping that performance spirit alive. So how do we decide which era truly stands above the rest? Let's break it down. The 64 GTO didn't just create a new model, it birthed an entirely new market segment. The 70 Chevelle LS6 set a horsepower bar that wouldn't be topped for decades. And the 87 Grand National? It showed that muscle cars could embrace the future without losing their soul. But it's not just about the cars themselves. It's about the memories they inspired, the culture they created, and the legacy they left behind. The 60s saw teenagers cruising Main Street on Saturday nights, revving their engines at stoplights. The 70s gave us iconic car chases in movies that still influence filmmakers today. And the 80s? They proved that American muscle could stand toe-to-toe with European sports cars, both on the street and the track. When you really dig into it though, it's hard to argue against the 1960s as the true golden age of muscle cars. They set the blueprint that all others would follow, creating an automotive revolution that still resonates today. The 60s gave us the perfect storm of big engines, mid-size bodies, and affordable prices. It was a time when you could walk into a dealership with a modest paycheck and drive out with a car that could outrun just about anything on the road. From the birth of the GTO to the turbocharged terrors of the 80s, muscle cars have left tyre marks all over American culture. These machines weren't just about getting from A to B. They were about how fast you could get there and how much noise you could make doing it. Whether you're into the raw power of a big block V8 or the high-tech approach of later years, there's no denying the impact these cars have had. Think about it. When's the last time you heard a rumbling exhaust note and didn't turn your head? That's the legacy of the muscle car right there. It's a uniquely American story of horsepower, innovation, and the endless chase for more speed. So next time you see a classic Mustang or a Grand National at a stoplight, give a nod to the history rolling by. These aren't just cars, they're chapters in an automotive story that's still being written today.